COVID-19 border restrictions will be lifted as of next Saturday. That's October 1st. This includes mandatory vaccination, testing, and quarantine requirements. However, Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos did say that pandemic restrictions could come back in the future if needed.
And we will therefore leave open all possible options when it comes to protecting the safety of Canadians in the world, in a COVID-19 world, which in particular we know has been generating all sorts of surprises over the last 2 years and a half.
The federal government is lifting all COVID-19 related measures at the borders, as I just mentioned in the previous story. An airport staff working at the Vancouver Port of Entry told to us about the logistics related to this. Asta Pandey-Kanan has the story.
Yahya Seb, working the port of entry at YVR, says newcomers are less worried because mandates are lifted and entry is easier. However, that does not mean they stopped quarantine rules for the non-vaccinated newcomers.
They're going to keep asking the question, like vaccination regardless, if they are those people like vaccinated or not. And I believe we're still going to provide, or let CBS, the yellow paper, which is you are not vaccinated. Can you just be under quarantine just for your own safety and everyone's safety as well?
Seb says the questioning process won't end for approximately another 2 months, and the 7-day quarantine will remain in effect for non-vaccinated individuals. I'm Asta Pandey-Kanan with 1680 The Crow.
And BCIT's news reporter Asta Pandey-Kanan joined us on the line right now to tell us a little more about this story. So Asta, tell us, what does the current procedure look like for newcomers entering Canada at YVR?
Thanks, Gurpreet. Every individual who is a newcomer to Canada is asked to fill out a CBSA form questioning their health history and proving their vaccine status. Even a baby requires their own individual form. And this will continue for another 2 months.
And so what are they doing differently now?
According to Yahya Seb, working the port of entry, what's different is now people don't have to take impromptu COVID tests when they arrive if they're fully vaccinated, which is a minimum of 2 shots. And only if someone is unvaccinated do they have to do a short quarantine. Plus, if someone does have COVID, they're asked to not fly at all. And if someone's family member has been exposed to COVID, only that member has to quarantine. The rest are free. That's all from me, Gurpreet. Thank you.
Thanks, Asta. The Surrey Police Force has deployed an additional 35 officers to Surrey's streets, and this brings the new police force to half of its target officers, a total of 155 so far. By May, they say they'll have 295 as part of their transition away from Surrey's RCMP. Also in Surrey, a nurse has been suspended by the College of Nurses and Midwives. She allegedly performed a ritual on a client without informed consent from that client before. The incident happened in June of last year. According to the report posted online, the nurse has agreed to several disciplinary conditions due to the incident. The BC Rural Health Network is a new committee that is meant to offer evidence-based solutions to healthcare policymakers in rural areas. The committee consists of a network of rural workers, researchers, and residents. President Peggy Skelton said that rural British Columbians feel they're being ignored and aren't included in conversations. A man was allegedly run over by a truck near a homeless encampment in Kelowna yesterday morning. The victim suffered serious injuries. According to police, alcohol was a factor in the incident. The driver, who had an Alberta license plate, was arrested at the scene. Also in Kelowna, 5 people died of toxic drug overdoses within a span of 9 hours on Saturday. The police issued a statement expressing their concern. They said, anyone using drugs should take care to not use alone and to test the drugs before using and carry naloxone kits. The overdoses come in the midst of BC's overdose crisis, which has seen thousands of deaths since a public health emergency was declared 7 years ago, including 192 deaths in July of 2022. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced that Canada will apply sanctions on Iran this morning, including many Iranian individuals and entities, as well as the country's so-called morality police. Protests have rocked the country in the past week while security forces have attempted to crack down on them violently. The protest began following the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini, who died after being arrested by Iran's morality police due to allegedly wearing a hijab improperly. Her death resulted in anger and protests across the country over personal freedoms, including women's dress codes. In Vancouver, thousands gathered on the steps of Vancouver's Art Gallery yesterday in a show of support for protesters in Iran. This was the third protest in downtown Vancouver within a week. In eastern Canada, the military's newest Arctic patrol ship will be doing wellness checks in Newfoundland small communities that were hit by Hurricane Fiona. Defense Minister Anita Anand made the announcement at a federal briefing today.
HMCS Margaret Brooke is sailing from St. John's this morning to conduct wellness checks in 4 communities on the south coast tomorrow, as requested by the province.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre accused the government of being far too slow in its support of those impacted by Hurricane Fiona during question period this morning. He said that farmers and fishers have experienced major damage and setbacks due to the post-tropical storm. However, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau claimed that his government responded quickly.
We will continue to be there as a federal government with immediate supports, with the military where it's needed, with investments in the short term, but we will also be there over the medium and indeed long term.
In international news, more hurricane trouble. Hurricane Ian is approaching Cuba and is getting stronger on the way. It's forecasted to hit Florida as early as Wednesday. ABC meteorologist Ginger Z said Ian could result in a huge amount of rain and flooding on the state.
We still have a wide cone, but as it's a Cat 4 approaching Wednesday night into Tampa, it's that push of water. A push of water for days will cause storm surge. So you have storm surge alerts, 5 to 8 feet for Sarasota, St. Pete, Clearwater. Fort Myers is in the 4 to 7. This is a worst case scenario, truly.
And Vancouver Canucks forward Brock Boeser will be out of commission for the next month after undergoing hand surgery. The Canucks announced this morning that Boeser was injured at the training camp on Saturday. He's expected to miss 3 to 4 weeks recovering from the surgery, and that includes the first week or 2 of regular season play. Boeser has said that he's hoping for a comeback this season. He's open about the loss of his father mid-season last year and how it impacted him. U.S. President Joe Biden met with last year's baseball world champs. Here's Sagar Meghani with the story.
Just over a year ago, nobody figured the Atlanta Braves would even make the playoffs. And then they went on what the president calls an unstoppable, joyous run, ending with a series win over the Houston Astros.
Forever known as the upset kings of October.
The current Braves were behind him in the East Room, but the focus was on a late legend.
This team is defined by the courage of Hank Aaron, the home run king.
The Hall of Fame Brave who died before last season.
We still think we had a special angel looking over us.
Braves CEO Terry McGuirk.
Hank Aaron pulling the strings from on high.
Sagar Meghani, Washington.
In entertainment news, the Toronto band Barenaked Ladies released its plan for touring across Canada this morning. The tour includes 14 stops across the country. They'll be playing songs from their Christmas album Barenaked for the Holidays, along with a number of other, quote, chestnuts and surprises. The tour begins December 1st. Here's a clip from their holiday-themed song, Christmas Time, Oh Yeah.
It's Christmas time. I think I see the children down the street. Here they come caroling. Now I can hear them. They sing, oh yeah.
In local weather today, it's mainly sunny with cloudy periods into the afternoon. There's a high of 22 degrees today, and it's cloudy overnight with a high of 13 degrees. That was your news to 12 o'clock. Gurpreet Kambo, 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
welcome to your favorite podcast companion call on 1680 The Crow. I'm your host, Astapandi Kanan, with my producer, Mac Fleet. Today I'm joined by two very special guests who are here to talk about something that can be quite hard for many to talk about. We often talk about how diverse Canada is. You know, I wholeheartedly believe that diversity is one of the biggest strengths that we have in this country. However, recently there have been many instances where minority groups have been subjected to hate crimes. Just last week, members of the BC Muslim community called for a more concrete action to address Islamophobia in our province and in Canada. And Stats Canada has actually revealed that Arabs and West Asians, from 2020 to 2021, there's been a 46% increase in hate crimes towards them. And specifically, a 71% increase in anti-Muslim hate crime between 2020 to 2021. And today, I actually have Bassam Abunadi, the director at Reclaim, a grassroots organization that works with educational institutions to address and combat Islamophobia. And I have Shane Hashmi, who volunteers with Aspire, a project by a Muslim food bank here to assist new immigrants and refugees in Canada. Shane is also a former member of the Langley Muslim Association before he moved to Surrey. So thank you, Bassam and Shane, for being here with us today.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's our honor to have you to talk about something that, you know, not many people like to talk about. So I'm just going to go right into it. What is your reaction when you hear about anti-Muslim hate crime? Like, what is your first reaction?
Well, I hope that my reaction is the same as everybody else's reaction. If we take the premise that Muslims are an integral part of the Canadian mosaic and that we are a part of the Canadian family, then my hope is that all Canadians are alarmed when they hear that any of their neighbors are being attacked because of their faith or because of their outward expression of their faith. Now, of course, being a member of the community, I do get to experience the lingering fear that sticks around when the cameras have gone. All Muslims that I know and that I speak with are worried about the next attack, whether in their places of worship or in their homes or when their wives and their daughters and their sons are walking to school or walking to work or walking to the bus. There is a palpable sense of discomfort and fear.
Yeah. Shane, how about you? Have recent events made you scared? How do you feel?
Yes, I feel about the same as Suad mentioned, and we have experienced similar circumstances. Most recently in Langley, well, that was about a year and a half ago. During Ramadan, there was a break-in in our Masala, that small mosque. And then recently in Surrey, when I moved to Surrey a few months ago, I was told, actually it was during Ramadan as well, when there was some graffitiing around the masjid area. And also there was an attack on some Muslims who were returning from the late night prayer. So a guy in a car was like threatening to overrun them. So that was a very big eye-opener for us. So then we interacted with the local police and informed them, and they informed us that they will be there to assist whenever there's a problem. But again, like Suad mentioned, there's a sense of discomfort among the Muslim community, especially when Ramadan time comes, and these kind of concerns, they arise because a lot of Muslims, they go to the mosques and then they get to experience these kind of unpleasant experiences.
Why do you think that is the case? Why do you think it's prevalent in Canada? Like, why does that happen in your community?
Well, it's to look at it holistically, I think it's I would blame the media to some extent, unfortunately, because Muslims are portrayed as they do these actions because of their faith, which is absolutely incorrect. So they need to be educated, the media needs to be educated and also guided on how to present news when certain kind of news they occur.
Right. Bassam, did you have anything?
Yeah, I have a slightly different take on that. And I'll try to be concise. So here goes. Nations, as we understand them, are essentially, at their very core, stories. They are carefully curated collections of facts that are put together in nice, neat packages and delivered through standardized education systems. That's essentially what a national story is. And the national stories are manifested in public institutions, the police, even something as innocuous as your public mail service, centers of learning. This is essentially how a nation state functions. It's the most popular and successful political model in the world. Canada has a very poor sense of itself relative to almost every other nation state that I've studied, looked at, read about. Canada has a very, very loose idea of what it is. And there are a ton of PhDs written about this, what it means to be Canadian. The opportunity that presents is it allows Canadians to continuously retell their story and to re-explore what it means to be Canadian. And on the most superficial level, this is a great time to be a Muslim because we're able to tell the story of Canada with ourselves in it. And because the Canadian story is so fluid and so open, we have an opportunity to do that in a way that Muslims in a lot of other countries, and not just Muslims, but other minorities in a lot of other countries just wouldn't be allotted that opportunity. It's just not possible. The pushback to that, though, or the flip side to that, is that people who are attached to a particular idea of Canada, however vague, however loosely defined, people who are very attached to that vision of Canada, when they're seeing hijabis on billboards and when they're seeing a cabinet that looks nothing like the Canada that they have in mind, they will push back, and they will push back hard. And so I think what you're seeing is a competition over what the idea of Canada actually is.
Oh, wow. Do you have anything to add to this, Shane?
Yes, I think so. I'd address the, probably I would call it the root cause. So it stems from right where it starts, actually, educational institutions and departments as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm as a local Muslim member of the community, what I experienced, so I recollected that and informed you about it. But I agree with Suad that there needs to be done, something needs to be done to address this at the root level.
Right. I have a quick question for you, Shane. You brought up the media. What do you think the media can do differently? What would you like us to do differently to help eradicate Islamophobia?
Right. I think the first thing they should stop using the term like Islamists or Islamic terrorists. I mean, they're actually linking terrorism to the faith. And I mean, if you look at it, if some non-Muslims does a similar act, then no one calls that person a Christian terrorist or so and so. So that I believe is unfair. So those terms should be avoided. Mm-hmm. And people get crazy, they do crazy things, but shouldn't be linked with their faith. That's what I believe.
Right, 100%. And Bassam, I know that you work at Reclaim. You work with students, you work with schools and districts. So can you tell us a little bit about how you're working towards, eradicating or combating anti-Muslim bigotry?
Sure. So a big part of what we do is to help educators transform Muslims into the protagonists in their own stories rather than the antagonist or the extra in somebody else's story. Now, what does that actually mean? It means celebrating Muslims and their history and their experiences in the way that they genuinely experience the world, in the way that they actually see themselves and the way that they actually see the world, even if that means, and this part is very important, even in a classroom where the way that Muslims may remember something is radically different and potentially uncomfortable for other people in the classroom. A classroom, especially one filled with children, should be respectful to everyone and should be comfortable or should be tolerant of everyone. But a classroom is also a place where you could challenge certain normative truths or certain beliefs or certain narratives. You want to talk about a timely launch point here. There's perhaps no better example I've ever seen in my life of how one group of people experience an event and a person and have a memory about something, and another people experience an event and a memory about something than the death of the Queen. If you have a large, if you're all over social media, then you saw something akin to a Canadian schizophrenia, where one group are posting eulogies and a whole bunch of other subaltern groups are basically posting memes, right? And so how did we arrive at that? Now, of course, I do really need to reiterate the importance of being respectful and courteous and mindful of everyone who's around you. But the point that I'm trying to make is that there are people in your classroom, there are people in your lecture halls who have a completely different memory of events of the past. And if they want to feel like they are part of the classroom, that they are part of the lecture hall, and they are subsequently part of that institution and that country and that place and that neighborhood, then they need to be able to share their stories.
I have a rather personal question for you guys. I'm married to a Palestinian Muslim man, and one of the things he said to me really stuck with me, and he said, Asta, there are some times that I don't introduce myself as a Palestinian Muslim. I just avoid the topic altogether because I know how a person's going to look at me. Have you been in that situation? Have you caught yourself in a place where you're not able to, Shane, let's start with that you're not able to say who you are?
No, I feel happy with what I am, with my faith, so I don't have any problem expressing myself and declaring myself as a Muslim, and so I don't have any such fears. Some people may have when they're pushed to a certain situation, so maybe I haven't been in such a situation where I had to do that, but I'm pretty confident that I don't have any problem expressing myself, so yes.
Yeah, I love that for you. Yeah.
I also happen to be a Muslim and a Palestinian, incidentally enough, and that was not planned, but here we are. While I do not have that exact sentiment, what I could say from experience is that sometimes being a Palestinian and being a Muslim is tiring. I work in this space. I talk about these things all the time. That doesn't mean I always feel like it, though. So sometimes, while I can't say that I do exactly what your husband described, sometimes I hear things that I decide not to address just because I don't have the energy for it. There are times where I just want to be watching MMA, where I just want to be, reading my book in the park, where I just want to be looking after my kids, and I don't want to get into a long political conversation with the people talking about Mideast politics. Now, I should say that more often than not, I do get involved, but sometimes I choose to ignore it because it's tiring.
Right. Yeah. Shane, can you talk a little bit about Aspire and what you guys do as a non-for-profit organization?
Yes, not-for-profit organization, and it's being run by a Muslim food bank that, as the name says, that it distributes food to the needy. So they initiated a project about 6 years ago when the Syrian refugees started coming in. So they invited volunteers to come and help and basically teach them English and help them get settled in the society. So I participated in that back 6 years ago. And then most recently, more refugees started coming in, especially from Afghanistan. So I'm doing a similar role, involved in a similar role now as well, helping them get settled here. They're looking at their basic needs, what they need, for example, language problem or well, I would say the ones that I've been dealing with, they're very good. They know English. But the other issues like settling down and finding a doctor and then and getting their resume up to date and according to Canadian standards. So things like that.
Have you faced any difficulties, or have the refugees who've come in, or faced any difficulties being Muslim, or just with the cultural shock here?
Right. Well, understandably so. There is some cultural shock, but I haven't heard any complaints about being targeted for being a Muslim. So fortunately, they get to mix up with their local communities, Muslim communities, so they get comfortable, and we also help them in doing that. And then gradually, our job is to just get them help into some point, and then after that we close the case and then move on to the next, because there are a lot of cases that we have to deal with.
Right, yeah. Bassam, can you talk a little bit about what else you do with Reclaim, in at least what are you doing in your capacity to eradicate or combat?
I should say that a significant amount of my energy and time is actually spent speaking to the Muslim community. Okay. So I don't know if the listeners know this, but October is officially recognized in Canada as Islamic History Month. And for most Muslims, Canadian Muslims and non-Canadian Muslims, this is kind of a blanket statement, they have a very vague understanding of their own past. Now, that's rooted in two forces. One is being subjected to the rule of the most Islamophobic regimes on earth who rule the modern Muslim world, but also centuries of colonialism. And so the average Muslim will have a somewhat familiar understanding of the prophetic age and early Islamic history. And then there's this giant black hole, and then there's modern lived experience, and everything in between is a blur. So I spend a lot of time speaking with Muslims just about the stories of the Islamic world. The purpose of this is to equip Canadian Muslims with a dignified version of their own past. That's not to say that I aim to provide them with a fantastical version of their past, because I think it's very important to be historically accurate and to be honest. But I want Muslims to be able to look at their own past and see that we did contribute to the human story. We were part of the human experience, and we were not just subjects of somebody else. Right. Again, to transform Muslims into the protagonists in their stories.
I understand what you mean by transforming Muslims to the protagonists. Is that something based off of self or internalized racism? Is that what you're combating, or am I understanding that wrong?
No, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So if you most of it, we spoke off air a bit, but in addition to the work that I do, I also have a podcast on Palestinian history, which is called Preoccupation. And if you read books about Palestine that were written before, let's say 1960, even if they were written by Palestinians, they were overwhelmingly relying on colonial sources. Right. Even if they were trying to give an honest account of their own history. So there's a lot of work. I don't just want to say to be undone. Maybe that's not fair, but there are a lot of stories that we have not explored yet, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I want to ask both of you more about your own lived experiences. I know we're talking about how to eradicate what happens, hate crimes, but in your own specific experiences, what is it to have a Muslim identity? Who are you? What is it to you to be Muslim?
Well, living in Canada is different. I lived in Pakistan as well for about 25 years. So being in a Muslim country is totally different. Living in a non-Muslim country is different. But with time, there are more and more Muslims coming to Canada. So that's making a difference, in my opinion. We have a lot of mosques here and there, and there are Muslim schools. And but then there is a fear in the back of the mind. My wife wears a hijab. So initially, when she used to go to work, I was very worried, because there were incidences happening those days. But with time, she gets a lot of respect at work, so she doesn't have any issues. But in the back of my mind, used to be, but now I'm okay because maybe because of time has passed and then nothing has happened, nothing bad has happened, thankfully. And so it's not, I won't say it's not, I haven't experienced anything lucky as well, and neither in my friends, but when we hear about incidences like during Ramadan, as I mentioned, those incidences, they're disturbing. They're disturbing, right? Because that can happen to anyone. I also go for late night prayers during Ramadan. So sometimes when a car is passing by and I'm all alone on the road, I do tend to just be careful. So there's fear in the back of my mind, but I tend to not think about it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Sorry, I'm just going to dig a little bit deeper. How do you not think about it? How do you mask the fear?
Well, by remembering Creator, because He controls our destiny, right? When we die, when we live. So that's if you have that faith, then you tend to just trust in Him, in the Creator.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Bassam?
If I've understood the question correctly, it's how do I understand, or how would I explain what a Muslim identity is like?
Your specific Muslim identity.
For myself, and if I was put in, as I am at this moment, of explaining what it feels like to be a Muslim, what I think is really important for a non-Muslim audience to understand is that modern Muslims carry with them numerous, sometimes complementary, but often conflicting collective identities. So while Muslim is one identity and a very, very, very important one that I carry, it's also colored by a bunch of other identities that I have. And I'll illustrate this with just like the simplest story that I can. And I've told it a few times and I think it captures it quite well. One of my neighbors asked me 2 summers ago, Bassam, where are you from? And I said, I'm Palestinian. And she said, oh, that's like our other neighbor, but she's from Jordan. And I said, no, actually, she's also Palestinian. She's from Nablus, and I'm from Jaffa. These are towns in Palestine. Mm-hmm. She said, but she told me she's Jordanian. I said, well, I'm also Jordanian. And she looked at me like I was speaking Russian, like she had no idea what I... And then she said, but she told me that she was born in the Emirates, so doesn't that make her Emirati, like from the Emirates? I said, no, and I was born in Saudi Arabia. And she said, oh, so you're Saudi Arabian. I said, no, I'm Palestinian. And I can assure you, first of all, I wasn't trying to be difficult. I was chasing after my daughter at the time, but she had no idea what I was talking about. Now, those things, the question, just the question, if I'm in a taxi in Jordan and the taxi driver asks me, where are you from the context of the question, I understand if he's asking me, where are you from in the world? Like, where do you reside? Because there's something off about your accent. Or where do you live in Jordan? Or where are you from originally? I know which one they're trying to ask, and it's a historian who I have a great relationship with named Michael Province, and in his writing about the Syrian civil war, not the current one, sorry, about the Syrian uprising in 1925, he said that there was one Syria, but there were many Syrian nationalisms. Right? Every Muslim carries with themselves a family identity, a tribal identity, a linguistic identity, a regional identity, and so, of course, I understand that for a non-Muslim audience, this can be very confusing. Every single one of those identities, though, touches on Islam and specifically the personality of the Prophet ﷺ in some way, shape, or form. Political legitimacy in the Palestinian experience was often tied to which families are actually descended from the prophetic lineage. And anyways, I could go on and on about that. But this is something that I think... I strive to explain to non-Muslim audiences that it's not just one, there's not just one identity that person in front of you is carrying with them.
Right, 100%. In the interest of time, unfortunately, I do have to wrap up today, but is there anything else you'd like to leave us and your audience, your non-Muslim audience with?
No, I think everyone knows what kind of citizen they're supposed to be. So I would say just be that citizen and respect other people's faith and their identities, and and then we also respect everyone and their identities. So yeah, and then just be a vibrant community.
Yeah, 100%.
I grew up watching my dad yell at the TV.
It's an activity that has made quite a racket, literally. Perhaps you've seen it in tennis courts at your local park, or some other courts that seem built just for it. The back and forth of a ball hitting the ground, the unmistakable clash of a racket hitting the ball, the laughter of competitors playing against each other. Pickleball is a sport that has recently exploded in popularity, with associations popping up across the Lower Mainland and membership within clubs booming. Even if you don't know any club members, you may have a family member or friend who has been swept into playing casually. We wanted to hear from some members about why they joined the craze.
Tom Westendorf is the marketing and sponsorship coordinator for the club, having joined on in 2019 just before the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. He first became acquainted with the sport around 2013.
My name is Tom Westendorf, and I'm responsible for sponsorship, donations, and marketing for the club. My wife actually started first about 6 years ago, and when I first heard the name, I thought, kind of a weird name for a sport, and sort of probably made a little fun of her for the first little while until I started playing. For me, it was about 4 to 5 years ago. I mean, it's really good exercise. The good thing is that it can be played by just about anybody. So this winter, with COVID and that sort of thing, I felt that this would be a good opportunity for me to get myself engaged with the club more seriously. So I think it's still in its infancy. I think it's picking up speed, if anything. Now this might sound silly, but I would not be very surprised to see this sport be competed, at a maybe even Olympic level someday. It's a great sport. It keeps you active. You get to meet a lot of people.
Kemi Dong is a retiree and has been a part of the club since last year. However, she will enjoy her first full season of pickleball this spring, and she is very excited.
Was playing tennis, and I used to go take a lesson every day. But then it was so boring because I couldn't find any players to play. So it was really frustrating, and then I look at this pickleball. So I was kind of struggling first, and then people were so helpful. So then I just started loving it. So I do that like every day to learn something different. It's like a full-time job for me now. Yeah. I'm here to play pickleball. I told my family, if the dinner is not ready, that means you can find me in pickleball courts. I retired, so I really needed a hobby. I always like sports. I've been doing hiking and, taking tennis lessons, whatever. But the pickleball I found is I found this passion. It's because I wish I found this pickleball maybe 10 years ago.
In our meeting with Kemi, we soon discovered something incredible. She urged us to meet with someone who had become a sort of legend within the club.
If you're here, there is a 98 years old guy who's going to be here in a few minutes. And he plays pickleball, and he teaches pickleball, and he always wins the pickleball game.
No way.
He's going to be here, I told him.
Meet Stan Fryer. At 96 years old, he can still play the game, and then some.
I'm just turning 96.
Having seen so much happen to the sport over a short period of time, Stan was hopeful for what heights pickleball could reach in the coming years.
I think it'll wind up in the Olympics.
Really?
Yeah.
All right.
I really do.
Yeah.
It's probably the fastest growing sport, certainly in North America, than any other sport has ever grown.
Yeah.
They're putting, I think, 12 new courts in Vancouver, and courts are springing up everywhere. It's just amazing. Yeah. That's the beautiful part of this sport. People can play it right up till, I'm sure, over 100 if they wanted to.
There were points where we actually paused our interview to observe the sport.
See, they're all moving up today.
Yeah, they're moving up there in that far game. Yeah. You know.
And you make a lot of good friends. A lot of good friends. Well, I started out playing in the church first, and we had a club there, and that was going for, that's been going for the 20 years in the church. The club out here didn't get started till probably 5 or 6 years later. A lot of these people I've taught, so that's how they all know me. I think I've taught at least probably 1,500 people.
Really?
Yeah, over the 20-year period, 18-year period. I think that's what some people play a game of just body. I try to play a head game.
From talking to these three players, it's clear that pickleball is more than just a sport to them. To Tom, it's part of his job to coordinate the club's development as word spreads in the community. It gets him more involved with the sport, which he enjoys. For Kimi, it's a time killer to have fun with other players competitively and casually. Her social circle revolves around the sport since discovering it. And for Stan, his passion is something that he can still partake in at his age, meaningfully with friends and family. That's a blessing you can't not appreciate.
I'm Seamus Page with my co-host and co-producer Jacob New for 1680 The Crow.
As COVID restrictions are slowly fading away, the Coquitlam Dodgeball League prepares for opening night of their 27th season, the first full season since COVID started.
When most people are looking for a recreational sports league to join, they think of hockey, basketball, or maybe soccer. However, this group of people have found their passion for dodgeball. The Coquitlam Dodgeball League, or CDL, was founded in 2007 and started with 16 teams. Now, it's made up of 40 teams with over 350 players. One player, Rob Gerard, has been playing in the CDL since it first began and is the only player to play every single year. 15 years later, he still plays, but is also the league director, which means he focuses on day-to-day tasks as well as launching every season. Rob doesn't make any money off the league. In fact, sometimes it's difficult to balance time between his job, family, and the CDL. He does this because he's passionate about the league and bringing people together.
I'm the only person that has played every season of the CDL. I've been a part of every single season, and I think I can count on one hand the amount of Wednesday nights that I've missed.
When asked how Rob got into dodgeball in his adult life, he said that it started on a whim.
And they were just three 20-something-year-old kids, and they got started on the Coquitlam Dodgeball League. And, I got a call saying, do you want to play dodgeball? And I thought that sounded like it could be something kind of fun to kill my time on a Wednesday night. I didn't realize that it was going to result in 15 years of work, but here we are.
Rob also explains the most difficult task of being the league director.
It's launching the season, no question. I'd say 90% of the work I do happens before the season starts. It's arranging gym rental contracts, ensuring that we have insurance. More recently, it's been making sure that we are in alignment with provincial health orders.
COVID added another layer of difficulty to Rob's job.
The pulse of the league wasn't a positive one at that time. People weren't too enthusiastic to expand their bubbles with people that they didn't really know very well.
We joined the CDL at Rochester Elementary in Coquitlam for their first opening night since the pandemic started. We were instantly met with warm welcomes and could feel the excitement and energy in the gym. Shortly after, league staff members jumped on stage to give everyone a reminder of the rules and regulations of the CDL.
Infraction happens at the end of the night, they will not be able to play the following week. Let's avoid that and not throw at each other's faces. Okay, cool. Let's play some dodgeball.
One of those rules and regulations is called a showdown.
Teams, there's a 10-second count. And if both players are still alive at the end of that 10-second count, we go to a showdown. And a showdown is one ball on each side of the middle, and each player gets 2. And there are no lines. There's no line boundaries. So it's just an absolute free-for-all, winner takes all. I was part of the CDL's very first showdown, and it was against a 7-year-old girl. Somebody brought their daughter to watch, and she wanted to play a game, and I couldn't bring myself to throw as hard as I could at this girl, so I was like, okay, I'll go to a showdown. And once the showdown started, the second I started walking towards her, she just dropped the balls and ran towards her mom, and I felt awful. I felt so bad. This little girl was so intimidated.
After that, the games got underway, and we were lucky enough to catch up with league founder Darren Domingo. Darren tells us what inspired him to create the CDL.
Actually, the real reason that we started a league here was because there wasn't, we couldn't play on the day that they were holding it anymore in Vancouver, so we decided to play it on Wednesdays in Coquitlam, and we started our own thing.
This season brought one entirely new team to the league, the Crusaders. One member of the team had just moved from Ontario to British Columbia. He said that finding new friends has been his biggest challenge since the move. Hoping to change that, he joined the CDL to meet new people in his new home. The Coquitlam Dodgeball League is also an active participant in the local community. They both host and contribute to a variety of local events that benefit organizations such as Canada Cancer Society, SHARE, and the Brain Tumor Foundation of Canada. They even dedicated a special tournament to honor the passing of Amanda Todd, whose brother is a part of the league. Rob explains that emotional moment.
We hosted the first annual Amanda Todd Legacy Tournament, and we raised a bunch of money. Amanda's mom was there. She said some words, and then we played the tournament, and it ended pretty poetically, actually. Amanda's brother plays in our league, and his team, although they were huge long shots, they ended up winning the entire thing.
The Coquitlam Dodgeball League looks to continue to make an impact on their community by bringing people together and hosting charity events. My name is Kyle Collis with Evan Tate, and you're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Maybe I'll play this song.
Can you imagine having to shut up for 2 years? That's how it felt for Ty Koch, one of the emergent musicians of Vancouver. But before going too deep into the challenges he faced during COVID, let's hear about Ty and his love for music.
Music was always something I had just done, especially with singing. It was almost like subconscious. I just always did it. There wasn't ever a time where I didn't see myself singing. It was always something.
Ty Koch has been booked across Canada and Europe playing his own music or singing classical music with a choir. And that's how he envisioned his musical career, never sticking with just one genre.
Yeah, they're very different. Because when I'm playing with the band, with the guys, like I'm just having fun. Like it's not stressful really. And even then, it's like you're kind of just like you're showing off a little bit. Like it's a different thing. Whereas when it comes to classical music, I feel like the music's, I mean, in comparison to music I write, I feel like it's more important. Like, and there's a lot more things to consider because the music's a lot more challenging rather than something I wrote. Because if it's my own, I can just do what I want. But following the classical music, there's very specific things that are dictated in the music that you have to follow.
But what looked to be the rising of a new promising career came to a full stop, all thanks to COVID-19.
I think it's bad to try and frame it like that. Obviously, I've had those thoughts of like, oh, you know, I would have been that much more ahead, and that's something that I did struggle with at first. But like, I mean, the more you just kind of reflect on stuff like that, the worse it gets. Because if you just spend all of your time thinking, oh, I could have had this, I could have had that, and then you just don't end up doing anything, which is what happened to me for quite a little while. It was like I was just sad. I had all these opportunities and they vanished. Like I was going to do like a tour in Europe with the choir I worked for, and I had all these other things planned, but that was the same situation for everyone. So you can't spend forever dwelling on what could have been.
Ty faced depression during the pandemic, and in music and friends, he found a way to cope with an uncertain future of his musical career.
I think it was literally like a coping thing. So it was like, for me, it was always like, oh, whenever I like felt upset or like angry or anything, it was like, oh, I can go play the blues music, go play on my guitar. So it was like, just to distract myself, that was what I did when I couldn't go out and see friends or like interact with anyone. I was just at home, basement, just cranking as loud as I could. Beginning of COVID, I played guitar so obsessively that I got tendonitis. So I was playing like 6 hours every day. I got way better, but now my wrist isn't quite as strong.
But for his roommate, Michael McKenzie, it just wasn't very nice to hear live music all the time.
It's nice for the most part. Occasionally it's pretty annoying when he's singing and I'm trying to nap, but other than when I'm napping, it's nice background noise, you know. He changes it up, whether it be opera or, because depending if it's his church stuff or his own music, it's either like blues, rock, or, you know, like opera, hymns.
Now that things have started to reopen, there isn't a boom like in other markets because, as Ty describes, COVID affected an industry that in Vancouver was already decaying before the pandemic.
And I think the unfortunate part with Vancouver is there isn't a lot of live venues. So now that it's finally coming back, there's other opportunities that are popping up, but it was like already kind of a dying music scene, unfortunately. People just don't really love to go to live music, which is pretty sad.
But not everything is bad. There are new opportunities and venues opening. Plus, Ty will finally be able to quit his job as a lifeguard.
I think there's some things that, like there's some, I know friends that I'm working with who are working towards opening other venues or working with other venues, because there's a format already in place in Vancouver that doesn't really work in terms of like live music. So there's people just looking at other avenues, so there's more opportunities within the city at least. And then for me, I've now taken a leave of my job as a lifeguard just because I needed a break, and I'm just going mostly all in on the music.
Like all new artists, Ty will have to regain the positioning and popularity he lost due to COVID, and to do so, Ty will be touring in Vancouver Island during the summer and will be releasing new music in late June. David Nava,
Dennis Shinolu, 1680 The Crow.
From the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus,
This is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good afternoon. I'm Bonnie Chikawa for your 1 o'clock news update. Federal ministers say all COVID-19 border restrictions will be removed as of Saturday. This includes mandatory vaccination, testing, and quarantine of international travelers, and also lifting the requirement for masks on planes and trains. Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos warns that pandemic restrictions could be reinstated if needed.
And we will therefore leave open all possible options when it comes to protecting the safety of Canadians in the world, in a COVID-19 world, which in particular we know has been generating all sorts of surprises over the last 2 years and a half.
The cabinet order maintaining the border measures will not be renewed when it expires on September 30th. In Surrey, there has been a report of a shooting that occurred on Sunday at 12 a.m. Police were called to Guildford Mall and upon arrival found a man with injuries and was taken to hospital. Police say the investigations are still in its early stages, but at this point it is believed that it was targeted shooting and the victim knew the shooter. Any information on the shooting is asked to contact Surrey Police. In Vancouver's downtown east side Serena's Housing for Women, more than 50 residents were forced from their homes Saturday due to a fire. It is a supportive housing project operated by Atira Women's Resource Society. Chief Assistant of Operations Brian Bertuzzi at Vancouver's Fire Rescue says the fire broke out in a suite and spread to other suites near the ceiling to the floor above. There was no reports on injuries, but the damage has been done, such as water and heat, and residents were told to evacuate due to the smoke. The cause of the fire remains under investigation, and it's unlikely that residents in the most damaged areas will be allowed to return Monday. On Saturday at Edmonton's International Airport, a man injured a police officer with a knife after a chase with the police around the building. The man was taken into custody and nobody else was injured. The officer quickly caught up to the suspect and an altercation took place that led to the officer's injury. Operations at the airport were not affected and continued as normal. The by-election to fill the seat as previous Saskatchewan NDP oppositions leader Ryan Melly is being held today. This election was set by the Premier Scott Moe in late August. In a release statement on the Election Saskatoon website, it says that 2,575 ballots were cast during the 5 days of advance voting, which finished Saturday. Moe said that at the time it was important for people to have a representative in place before the fall session in October. Those who haven't voted yet can cast their ballot in person today at 13 different locations, and preliminary results are expected after the polls close at 8 p.m. In Ottawa, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau faced questions in House of Commons today about his government's response to the post-tropical storm Hurricane Fiona. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says farmers and fishers have seen major setbacks as no power in the thousands of homes and businesses, and they accuse the government of not acting fast enough.
We will continue to be there as a federal government with immediate supports, with the military where it's needed, with investments in the short term, but we will also be there over the medium and indeed long term.
Trudeau's response says the Canadian government and military will respond with immediate support and will continue to help everyone affected in the long term. Defense Minister Anita Amnad says the announcement made an announcement stating the government's plan of the military's new Arctic patrol ships will be conducting wellness checks in small Newfoundland communities where they were hit by Hurricane Fiona.
HMCS Margaret Brooke is sailing from St. John's this morning to conduct wellness checks in 4 communities on the south coast tomorrow, as requested by the province.
Hurricane Ian is now coming close to Cuba on the track to strike Florida next as a Category 4's early Wednesday. Hurricane Ian is already setting stronger and is forecasted that it will move quickly over Cuba's western tip today. Tampa and St. Petersburg are most likely the targets for their new direct hit on the major hurricane in a century. In local weather today, it is mainly sunny with cloudy periods into the afternoon. There's a high of 22 degrees and it will be cloudy overnight with a high of 13 degrees. That was your news for 1 o'clock. My name is Bonnie Chikawa for 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.